Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Monday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing well out there, staying safe. We have the flooding situation that's still ongoing this morning in areas of the Northeast, New England. We're certainly hoping and praying for the best up there. I'm not waking up to any crazy social media posts or anything like that, or any wild flooding videos, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening as I speak right now. Today is kind of the last day of a big time flooding risk, but of course, even the days after a big time flooding situation, you still deal with issues with just rivers that are overflowing, things like that. But as far as rain falling, today will kind of be the last really bad day and might be the worst day. And we'll talk about that. We are under a high risk for excessive rainfall in areas of the northern New England area. So we'll break that down. That'll be the big storyline today. It's been the big storyline over the last 24 hours. And we'll try to get detailed with you guys one last time for that for you folks up in the Northeast. And then we'll talk about how a lot of areas could be impacted by severe weather today. But then some of these areas that are under the risk of some of these strong to severe storms might not see a drop of rain. But I'm watching really specifically for a low-end tornado threat in areas of Wisconsin and Minnesota today. We'll talk in detail on that. And of course, we'll break down everybody else too, because we are dealing with some showers and storms just along and just south of this frontal boundary that has begun to stall out and weaken across areas of the Gulf Coast, the Southeast, and just up the eastern seaboard. So with that being said, if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If you ever consider joining the channel, the join tab's right here on the header of my YouTube. And there's also a join tab right below the video. Sometimes if you're watching from your phone, it's hard to see, but I appreciate anybody who supports me in that way. I have 34, 35 members now, trying to hit the 40 by the end of summer. So thank y'all for people who have chose to support me unconditionally in that way. It means the world. July is off to a really good start with my channel, even though things have slowed down, which is always good news. How does a channel do when things really slow down? It continues to do well. I've already exceeded, actually blown out the water of July of last year just in the first several days of July this year. So thank you all for the amazing support. If you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it and gives others an opportunity to do so too. Let's take a look at water vapor loop. You can see this punch of dry air coming in behind this cold front right here. This is stalling out. It's weakening. Eventually it'll fully dissipate and then the moist air will return. But I can tell you, areas of the Southeast like South Carolina, North Carolina, areas of Georgia will be well below average today. As much as 10, 12 degrees below average. You'll be stuck in the 80s. And, just some clouds, rain-cooled air. You're dealing with some moisture this morning crossing Georgia out of Alabama into areas of the low country of South Carolina, even upstate of South Carolina, seeing a little rain. And then, of course, you're seeing a lot of rain up in New England where it continues. The atmosphere basically continues to squeeze out every bit of moisture possible with a saturated column, meaning you have very moist air all the way up to about 25, 30,000 feet up in the air. We'll talk about that sounding here in a second. It's very interesting. We'll get a little nerdy with you guys. But we got ridging out west and some troughing out east. We need to see this in the winter so we can get some snow. And then we have kind of a spinning very broad low up in Canada that's beginning to slowly drift towards the Great Lakes region. We're going to see a piece of energy fly down the base of this broad area of low pressure. This piece of energy will initialize some severe storms in the upper Midwest right here in this region, and it will create enough of a kinetic atmosphere for a brief tornado threat. And then we're just going to deal with the chance for showers and storms down here into this region. So trying to avoid clearing my throat, coughing in the video. So if you see me take a sip of water, that's just trying to avoid that. Talking so much in the morning sometimes gets my throat a little irritated and things like that. But here we go. We look at the Southeast, we look at Georgia, the Carolinas, even southeast areas of Alabama, the panhandle of Florida. A lot of tropical downpours down here ahead of this front, so that is really stalling out. It's beginning to slowly clear the region, but it's weakening at the same time. These cold fronts are never that strong, never that it never really truly affects the temperatures much this time of the year, but today it will, just with the associated rain, things like that. And we're dealing with the rain here in South Carolina, central and north Georgia, southeast areas of Alabama, the Panhandle, Florida, even some heavy storm activity ongoing south of Columbia. Might hear a rumble of thunder here in my neck of the woods. If you folks don't know, I live here in Lexington, just outside the suburbs of Columbia, South Carolina. But dealing with this, we go up to the northeast, and this is the big storyline. We have flash flood warnings ongoing, and this is going to be the big storyline today, even outside the severe weather. And, you know, you look at the yellows and the oranges and the reds, that is where it's really coming down. And even in these areas where you just see dark green and yellow, guys, I would argue it's raining harder than what the radar is showing in these regions. And it's like I said, it's because the atmosphere is super saturated. And that means it's just squeezing out every bit of raindrops that you can think of and that's falling to the surface into these regions. No real dry air aloft to really evaporate any kind of, in any form of way of this moisture in the atmosphere. But you got some rain also into New Hampshire, even into areas of eastern Maine. But it's raining pretty hard in the Berkshires of western Mass, and even down here in far northwest Connecticut. You're getting a lot of rain, flash flood warnings up that you're dealing with. So we moved to the Storm Prediction Center for today. Slight risk, which extends. I mean, you pretty much can connect this. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they connect this sometime today. But technically it's not, so we won't say it is. But slight risk for the panhandle of Texas and surrounding sections of each state, extreme southwest Oklahoma, areas of west central, northwest central, whatever you want to call it, Texas, like the Lubbock area, all the way to Wichita Falls, almost all the way to Abilene. And then the slight risk, which extends from the Central Plains all the way to the upper Midwest, all the way up into Green Bay. You look at the tornado risk today, really this is the only real area that we'll watch for a tornado. But of course, you can always get a tornado even in an area that's below 2%, which does not show up on the graphics. So just because you don't see a risk, it does not mean there's not one. There's always a risk with the storm. You never know when the rogue storm's just going to do its thing and produce a tornado. So there is a 2% risk of a tornado. Okay, this includes areas like Eau Claire, Minneapolis, La Crosse, Green Bay, all these areas in between. So please be aware of this. We'll talk on detail on that here in a second. Winds, there's a 15% risk in both of these slight risks of winds exceeding 50 knots or higher. That's 55 to 60 miles per hour. Hail threat, a little bit slimmer, but there is a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger in these regions. Flooding risk, this is the big deal today. We do have little pockets of areas you need to watch, like the low country and the coastal areas of South Carolina, like Charleston up the Myrtle Beach. And then we have right along the Red River here in Oklahoma and North Texas, you got a slight risk of excessive flooding occurring, which means there is at least a 15% risk of flash flood guidance being exceeded. Then you have all kinds of crazy colors up here in the Northeast. And let's go on and just zoom into this. So areas of the eastern Adirondacks, the Green Mountains of Vermont, this concludes Burlington, down the Rutland, Montpelier. You guys have that high risk. But I will say that it has slimmed up a little bit. This was larger, and when we talked about this in last night's video, speaking of last night's video, I have not had time to answer the comments. I will do so later this morning, I promise you guys. But you do have the moderate risk surrounding it. But if you're wondering what that pink area means, that is at least a 70% risk of flash flood guidance being met. The red is a 40% risk. So take the red serious too. Heck, take the yellow serious. That is the 15% risk. But if you're not familiar with the terrain of New England, of course, when you get closer to the coastal regions, you got coastal regions, not many mountains, but I can tell you the mountains go all the way to the coastal regions in Maine. It's a beautiful area of the country. But of course, when you get into the interior areas of New England, if you didn't know, it's very mountainous. I mean, you don't even have to drive very far away from New York City, and you run into mountains like the Poconos and the Catskills. So it's very mountainous up here in New England if you're not familiar with this area. And we know that higher elevations, higher terrain mixed with a lot of rain, elevation and a lot of rain do not go together well. It causes some of this runoff to go to these small creeks, ponds, even rivers, and then they overflow their banks. And what do you get? You get the flooding of these small towns and communities. So hopefully today is not going to be as bad as what it could be. So let's hope for the best. We look at watches and warnings. Flood watch is up for all of southern New England. Not everybody, Boston's considered in southern New England, but you guys certainly could see some rain today. But you got flash flood warnings, flood watches up for many counties, pretty much all of Vermont, just about all of New Hampshire, all of eastern New York State. You got some dense fog advisories out here in Kentucky, all the northern counties of Tennessee. Would just typically when you get one of these stalled frontal boundaries, you can get a lot of times a lot of fog. Heat is building in Texas. You got heat advisories returning, so prepare for another hot day here in Texas, southern areas of New Mexico. Then you got excessive heat watches and warnings out west. And it's starting to get kind of dry up here in Washington State areas of Oregon, so we need to watch out for that. But the middle of the country, nothing right now that we're dealing with. Have not mentioned the tropics in some time. It's your tropical update. We are watching an area that could become a subtropical low, or it could gain tropical characteristics. And basically what could happen is you got an area of low pressure that could eventually develop and interact with upper level trough. And typically when they do interact with these upper level troughs or upper level energy in general, they lose or really never have those tropical characteristics. But we have to watch these little systems. Sometimes they can take a name really quick, but not really impact anybody except fish. But we're watching this. But outside of that, if we look at the entire Atlantic Basin, there is a vigorous looking tropical wave coming off North Africa. But it's going to interact with hostile conditions and then probably dissipate. It's pretty quiet out there, which is typical in July. What's wild about the hurricane season is a lot of times you have an early flare-up early in the season, which can happen in May, can happen in June a lot. And then usually July is very quiet. The whole entire Atlantic, I always want to say Atlantic Basin is normally dominated by Saharan dust or either high shear, and it just creates hostile conditions for this tropical development. So let's go on and break down the Southeast. So if I'm missing your state in the Southeast, like Kentucky, Tennessee, maybe Missouri or Arkansas or portions of your state, we're not expecting any rain. In fact, Tennessee to Kentucky, Tennessee could see some rain. Up to Kentucky, no rain expected. So we're just going to break down these areas. Dealing with rain, obviously, this morning in areas of Alabama and Georgia and the panhandle of Florida. We will continue to move this here in time. We get into late morning. Some of these tropical downpours could develop from central Louisiana all the way along the southern sections of Mississippi, southern sections of Alabama, and I think they'll be very widespread where, you got to watch out for a risk of flooding in the panhandle of Florida. We keep this going. We get into the afternoon hours, 1, 2, 3 p.m. You're still dealing with, the Bayou of Louisiana, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Gulfport, Mobile, all the way to Tallahassee, Florida, and everybody in between. You guys are going to be dealing with these tropical downpours all day. Definitely not a good beach day. I think even when it's not raining or storming, you're going to be dealing with a lot of clouds. And this will continue throughout the afternoon hours. Things might calm down by the time we get into the evening hours, right around sunset in this region. But a lot of rain between now and then in these regions. We get into the overnight hours and we could do it all over again, be waking up to more showers and storms in those same general areas as we're waking up tomorrow morning. Rainfall in these regions, you could get quarter, half inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch of rain in areas of Louisiana, southern sections of Mississippi, southern sections of Alabama. A lot of this rain you're seeing here is what's falling right now up here in more central portions of Alabama. But the panhandle of Florida, 1, 2, maybe as much as 3 inches of rain as possible today, just in the next 24 hours. So go on and expect that. Florida, what we'll watch for as we get into about the lunchtime period, not a whole lot going on in the peninsula of Florida, but you work your way up into the northern portions of Florida, the panhandle of Florida. A lot of heavy rain, tropical downpours falling. Some of these storms could bring strong to severe limits, hit that strong to severe limit. Could be some gusty winds, maybe some small hail. But there is a marginal risk of severe weather into this region today. But then as we get later on into the afternoon, 4 p.m., some storms are possible in southern areas of Georgia. And then you could have more of a stronger line of storms potentially moving through the Big Bend areas of Florida, northern Florida. But this might be actually one of those rare days down here and maybe central Florida points south where you don't have that much widespread storm activity. Most of it might stay to the northern portion of the state in the panhandle, but eventually probably this evening you guys will deal with some showers, maybe some storms as far south as Tampa Bay or Orlando. So rainfall in this region, like I said, most of this area is in North Florida where, maybe 1 to 2 inches of rain could fall in the Big Bend areas, and then areas of the panhandle where, 1 to as much as 3 inches of rain could fall. Take it up to my folks here in the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia. What we're dealing with this morning really is an area of rain that's crossing. In fact, this same rain that's just hit my house. Currently, I can hear it raining outside. And this is going to continue to move through the Midlands of South Carolina, the low country of South Carolina, eastern Georgia. We take it to about 1 p.m. We're still dealing with some heavy rain in Augusta, according to the HRRR model. This rain will eventually take over the coastal areas of all of South Carolina, maybe as far northeast as maybe Wilmington, North Carolina. You'll be dealing with some showers and maybe even some downpours this afternoon, this evening, and then all the way into the evening hours. I think it takes all the way clear until we get into the late evening hours before all this rain really clears out. So if you're vacationing along the South Carolina, Georgia coastline, extreme southeast North Carolina, you're certainly going to be dealing with some rain today. So go on and expect that unless you get out there really early this morning. But rainfall, for Charleston up to, the Garden City, Surfside region, almost all the way out to Myrtle Beach, 1 to 2 inches of rain. And you got to watch out for flooding, freshwater flooding, and just ocean water flooding in areas of Charleston. Sometimes it don't take much. I really worried one day for Charleston. One day, you guys, if we get another Hugo type situation in Charleston, the drainage system is absolutely horrid in Charleston, and I do worry about catastrophic flooding. But let's not talk about something that isn't forecasted yet. We look at the interior sections of the Northeast here. This rain that we're dealing with this morning will continue to cross over these same areas. Stop it here. It's around lunchtime. A lot of rain even falling in the Cape Cod regions. Boston, a lot of rain still falling in the Berkshires, all the way up to the Green Mountains of Vermont, northeast sections of New York State. You're dealing with rain in Vermont, extreme eastern areas of Maine. And we'll stop it here, and let's go on and get a little bit closer. We'll stop it. Well, as you can tell, throughout the morning hours, dealing with a lot. This yellow and red here, this is when the rain could add up quick. It looks like you're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, right? Most of the rain is starting to begin to pull up north, and it's not as widespread, but this is where the last hurrah, if you will, could really dump a lot of rain on Vermont. Stop it right here. It's around 4 p.m. This is, almost storm activity over Vermont. Heavy, heavy rain falling over the state, and even in northern and northeast sections of New York State, the eastern Adirondacks. But the Green Mountains absolutely getting clobbered with maybe half-inch to 1-inch rainfall rates per hour. This could get dangerous, especially this afternoon in these regions. And then, we take it out to late evening. You might begin to see a little bit of a gap here in southern areas of Vermont, New Hampshire, Mass, where the rain finally stops, but it's still raining very heavily up here in northern Vermont, where you do have that high risk of flash flooding up here. And then we continue to get into tomorrow morning, and still dealing with some light to moderate rain up here. This is a lot of rain that could fall in this region just today. And rainfall just between now and the next 24 hours, guys. Look at this section up here near that Burlington area, just north of the Rutland region. What is it, Montpelier or something? Let me see. I don't want to butcher the name. I should know. Montpelier, not Cellier. Montpelier. Another 3, 4, 5 inches of rain, especially, I would say, just west of y'all. Basically between Montpelier and Burlington, that is where the epicenter of the heaviest rain, based off the National Weather Service, could fall, or as much as 4 to 6 inches of rain can fall in the next 24 hours. And that is going to lead to some serious conditions. But a lot more rain could still fall in the Berkshires, even into western sections of Connecticut. Please take this serious today. A lot of rain, even in the Adirondacks, is going to fall, especially the eastern sections of the mountains. So, we look at the sounding. This is basically a sounding over the entire state of Vermont into western sections of Mass. So you see the temperature, right? 68 degrees in the red. This is where that's where the temperature is. Okay, the red is the temperature. The green is the dew point. So if you notice, the dew points are right up against the temperatures. all the way up until you get to about 300 millibars, which is equivalent to around 28 to 32,000 feet. Okay, that is way up there. So the atmosphere is saturated all the way up here, which means the atmosphere is squeezing out every bit of moisture possible. So extremely moist flow, not only at the low levels, but the mid levels too of the atmosphere here. So, and if you look at the wind barbs, they're coming out the south, but if you look down here, they're coming out the southeast. So they're getting an enhancement off the ocean, even inland into these mountainous regions. So super saturated situation and a dangerous situation into the northeast. Please stay safe. It's probably some dicey conditions even ongoing right now as I speak. So we make our way, let me go on and get this situated here. We make our way to the south central U.S. You could deal with some showers and storms into this region. What we will watch for is kind of a same flow out here west to east, and you'll get some storms that get going. There could be a powerful storm or two here in northwest or western sections of Kansas. Even a supercell or two is possible in the southern half of Nebraska today, so be careful in these regions around the North Platte region, down to the southern sections. And then, this is why you only have a marginal risk of severe weather kind of around the Dodge City region, basically southwest Kansas, the panhandle of Oklahoma. They're not expecting as widespread storm coverage, but, we started early in the period around 4 or 5 p.m. You could get a supercell or two in Colorado. Please be careful if you're in any of these small towns and communities, but they're very isolated, as you can tell. We get into about 9, 10, 11 p.m. You got a cluster of storms here in southern Nebraska, maybe a strong to severe storm around Amarillo, and just some light to moderate rain, maybe at times heavy, kind of moving through areas of like Lubbock and surrounding regions. And then as we get into the overnight hours, we get into 2, 3 a.m., some stronger storms are possible, which could cause a flooding concern around the Red River between Oklahoma and Texas, the state line here. And we'll watch for this little cluster of storms as it makes its way into tomorrow morning. But this might provide some flooding concerns around this region. Watch Wichita Falls. Watch out southern sections of Oklahoma also. But I'm not expecting a huge day, but you're going to get 1 or 2 probably big time storms into the high plains right in here today. Now we look at the north central U.S. Okay, we get into this afternoon. Here comes that piece of energy, throwing some storm activity here north of Minnesota into Canada. But look at all the storm activity developing here in northern areas of Wisconsin. You could get some storms in the UP of Michigan. I know I got some viewers up here in this region. I appreciate y'all very much. You could get some heavy rain and then eventually some storm action as we get to, I would say, the time period will be probably just after the 2 to 3 p.m. range. You got to start watching the skies up here. But these storms right into here, just north of Minneapolis into the, into the Eau Claire area, maybe as far south as Rochester, La Crosse. We got to watch these areas right in here. Minneapolis actually is under that 2% risk of a tornado. These are the storms I want to watch right in here, but I don't want to ignore you folks down here in Iowa. You do have a risk. I would watch out for some big time storms to form right where South Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska connect. These could ride south all the way into the Omaha area later this evening. We already talked about this little cluster right here. And there could be some big storms that eventually float into the Ames area, the Des Moines area, Rochester region. So let's go on and zoom into this area right here into the upper Midwest. Like I said, some showers could make their way through, especially the central to eastern UP of Michigan later this morning, and then we'll get more widespread storm development. Some of these could produce large hail and then a tornado. We got to watch for enough kinematics into this region for a low-end tornado risk. Okay, so do not be surprised if we get some tornado warnings up in central and northern areas of Wisconsin and then extreme eastern areas of Minnesota. These storms will continue. This is around 5, 6 p.m. Remember, this is in Eastern time. Back it up an hour. So this is around 6 p.m. dealing with some storms. Looking very stormy for the UP, northern Wisconsin. And then these begin to drift. I mean, you guys could get a lot of rain from this too. Maybe a half inch. Maybe somebody could squeeze in an inch of rain. But you take it out to about 10 p.m., dealing with some nasty storms drifting down into that Eau Claire area, La Crosse region, even near the Minneapolis area, points south. And you're dealing with a lot of heavy rain. This will eventually sag south and fully dissipate. But you look at the updraft velocity swath in this region, you see these little highlighted regions. Even look here in the UP of Michigan. Okay, but you look into this region right here in western Wisconsin, this is where you're going to have your biggest tornado threat. You do have that 2% risk. Expect some storms to rotate a little bit with this piece of energy basically sagging down to the lower portion of this broad low up in Canada, creating a kinematic atmosphere here. And with this pulse of energy rounding the base of this is going to provide widespread showers and storms into this region. So be careful if you're in western, central Wisconsin to eastern areas of Minnesota. I would even watch out into the UP of Michigan for not only strong to severe storms, but a low-wind tornado threat in this region. The Rockies out here, the western U.S., we're going to be dealing with some widespread rains, I think, from northeast Washington State, the northern half of Idaho, and then the western half of Montana. You could deal with some scattered downpours also in eastern and northern areas of Wyoming. Some storms are possible, like I said, in eastern areas of Colorado, where you do have a severe weather threat. But some widespread rains are likely in western Montana, some of these higher elevations. So you guys could pick up some appreciable rain today. Even a stronger storm or two could develop. And in fact, let me see. You do have a marginal risk in Montana. So you do have a risk of some strong to severe storms in Montana today. So take that serious. These will make its way through the state. And then throughout the overnight hours, this will become more widespread into the central and eastern portions of the state. Temperatures today, warming up big time ahead of this boundary, ahead of this big time a low that's dipping south. It will cool the temperatures down with an associated a cold front that will dip down and cool you guys right back down. 80s and 90s though, south of this boundary into Wisconsin and the southern half of Minnesota will feel a lot different than the northern half. But everybody else, widespread 80s, are starting to warm back up. Heat's building back in like Missouri. But it'll be well below average potentially in areas of, especially South Carolina, where you'll hang on to the clouds. Hot in Florida, heat advisories down here, very hot in Texas. Air temperatures pushing 100 degrees for a lot of portions of Texas with heat indices well above 105, 110 degrees. Rain cooled air in the northeast, only in the 60s and 70s, and out west, you're cooling down for the Pacific Northwest finally. It was very hot over the last several days, but you're cooling back down. Still hot in southern Idaho in these valleys, and then hot where it normally is always hot in the desert Southwest. And then the valley areas, not too bad compared to what it could be this time of the year, but the high plains, widespread 90s into these regions, very hot temperatures. That's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all. Stay safe up there in the Northeast, and I'll be with y'all in the next video.